What's the dumbest mistake you've seen an incompetent co-worker make?
At a Petco, all the guinea pigs were in a big plexiglass enclosure with a center divider. Boys on one side and girls on the other. An employee decided that all the long-haired guinea pigs should be on one side and short-haired on the other. It took forever to sort them out, and all the females were pregnant.
This is why PetSmart runs its stores as boy, girl only for the whole store. F-ups still happen, but not like this.
Try to cool down hot oil, in a chute, all ready to be emptied, with a nice big bucket of water. I heard Thomas no, only to turn around and see a geyser of hot oil shooting towards the ceiling before it hit and splashed down around him. Nobody was hurt some f-ing how. Edit. Because it has come up. The chute that the oil was in was on wheels and had a wooden handle. It absolutely didn't need to be cooled lol.
I worked at a company with a shared inbox. One guy sent all of his emails with a distinct font and color. He was super untrustworthy and sucked at the job. One day he sent an email to a customer from the shared inbox but put my signature on it, to make it seem like it came from me instead of him. He left the font and color the same as all of his other emails. He didn't last long there after that.
One of my first office jobs had a really old system for recording notes on customer accounts, such that it would stamp whoever last edited the account record as being the last person who contacted the customer for the purpose of reporting. I realized pretty quickly that my supervisor was going through and doing small edits on all my notes to pump up her numbers, making it look like I wasn't hitting my quota. She was later fired for some other drama and went on to go to jail for stealing from the bank where she worked.
The designer, creative director and head of production all missed that there was an 8-day week on a calendar. We sent 10,000 copies of a useless calendar to a client. Rightly so, they refused to pay for it.
What day did y'all add? Twomsday, Friday, Snunday?
Shut down a critical file server, then lied about it. Even after he was presented with the logs that showed it was his user account that initiated the shutdown. It's not so much the mistake that he made, but it was when he lied about making the mistake. That was a rookie move.
I worked as a database tech once, and my boss was super upfront in training. If you F up, come tell me immediately. No matter how bad it is, come tell me and I can try to help you fix it. But if you try to cover it up, you will fail. It will cause more and more problems until it breaks something important. All the data will be in the logs. I'll find out who F'd up, and I will, let me repeat this, I will throw you under the bus. So save yourself the trouble, and just tell me when you F up.
Tried to retrieve his lighter from a deep fat fryer with his hands. Boy was that fun to clean up.
When I worked in restaurants, one of the cooks told me that another cook had dropped his watch into the fat fryer, and instinctively plunged his hand into the fryer to retrieve it.
New guy was dragging two 8,000-pound rolls of paper through the warehouse. This is against the rules for good reason. Anyway, he drove through a door designed for one roll, and the top roll through the wall. Link. Edit. No, that isn't a typo. I spoke with a roll grab driver this morning to double check my facts. The rolls in this plant are between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds each. The picture really can't do justice to the scale here.
At least the door is now suitable for 2 rolls smiley face.
When I was in the Navy, this known dumbass and pathological liar was on armed watch with an M14 patrolling the topside decks. Literally all you have to do is walk around for 4 hours with a rifle on your shoulder. This dude came back to the quarterdeck, main entrance to the ship, with no gun. He tried to claim it fell off his shoulder and into the water while tying his shoe. How a rifle would fall off your shoulder, pass through your hands that were tying the shoe, and through all 3 lifelines, like guard rails, is still a mystery. My theory is that he was doing drill team stuff, like tossing it spinning in the air, and lost it that way.
When I was in the Navy, we had a newer guy join my team. He was a first class transferred from another ship. Anyways, we were doing some night operations training on our RHIBs around San Diego Bay. We finish the night ops training and I'm checking in all the NVG, night vision goggles, and one of them doesn't match the others. In fact, it's a pair I had never seen. It was an older model and the serial numbers didn't match anything we had at our command. It was really strange. We were also missing one pair. They were checked out as a group, so we were not sure what was going on. It was not until the next day, we found the serial number of those goggles were missing from a ship. The same ship this dude transferred from. He stole a pair, got away with it a few years before. Then tried to swap them out for a newer pair. He was on restriction and removed from the Navy a few months later. Blows me away what people think they will get away with. Nearly leaving a child behind on a field trip. We took a large group of 4- and 5-year-old children to visit a farm, petting zoo, pumpkin patch. We had 3 vehicles. I was in charge of my own group, but I noticed one of the other teachers was being very lax in her supervision for most of the trip. When it was time to leave, I loaded my children on the bus, with some other adults, and did a head count, attendance check. Before getting on my bus, I noticed that the other teacher had climbed onto her bus and sat down before the children boarded. She walked on first and had the kids follow her. I almost let it go, but gut instinct told me she wasn't counting her students. Once they were all boarded, I walked back and climbed on her bus. She seemed irritated when she realized I was checking on her. I was not a supervisor or anything, just a fellow teacher, so she didn't answer to me in any way. She said something like, "We're all good, let's go." I knew how many were in each group, so without answering her, I did a quick count. Sure enough, we were missing one. I ended up leaving the bus and going to find the kid myself. He was still on the playground with children from another school. When we got back to the bus, the other teacher blamed the kid. She said he wandered off. Really, she is the one who gathered the group and left the play area, meaning she is the one who wandered off. She was pissed when I went to the administration about the incident.
This reminds me of the time the local work camp prison left an inmate behind at a job site. No one bothered to do a count. Fortunately, the guy was honest and didn't want to end up in prison for a longer period of time, so he walked himself to the jail. No one wanted to accept the blame for that mistake.
Worked in a machine shop. One of the lathe operators left the bar of cold-rolled steel he was turning hanging out the back. When he turned the machine on, it literally deformed and turned into a freaking helicopter blade, ripped the back of the machine apart, and eventually flew off at high speed. Luckily no one got hit by it. If so, they'd be dead.
Oof. I haven't run a lathe in some time, but I feel this one. Sleeves up, watch off, tie off, no jewelry, gear disengaged, no stock, key in my back pocket instead of the chuck, area clean and tidy, okay we're ready to go. Every time I powered up. Otherwise, yeah, dead or deformed. My cousin got his sleeve caught in a machine once, super lucky one of the operators nearby hit the switch and he got out of it. Edit, my personal experience is not your own. You probably don't wear a tie in a machine shop. I'm not a machinist by trade but have spent hours on a heavy-duty lathe. Yes, I'd be working with stock or with something else locked in the collet that I needed to repair.
FYI, I still know the guy that did this. He's in IT now. Much safer lol.
I worked in a paint shop and every time a new chemical was introduced to the shop, I would ask about the hazards. They would tell me that it is a green chemical, there are no hazards. It's baby safe, they would say. Once when I entered the shop I saw a guy using a new spray. The side of the bucket indicated that it was dangerously poisonous and highly corrosive. I told him that he should be using a mask and gloves to use that chemical. He said don't worry, it's baby safe. They even have a picture of a baby playing in it. Sure enough it did, link. After seeing the image, I yelled at the guy greater than, this is the baby. He is not playing, he is not swimming, he's dying, less than. The office we worked in was shut down due to COVID and the company went 100% remote. A new senior engineer was hired to work directly with our product team and also manage a team of developers. During our company-wide weekly Zoom meeting after he was done presenting for the company he turned his camera off but forgot to put himself on mute. 100+ people heard this man playing Fortnite and talking down about the company to someone else in the background among other things. He only lasted a month.
More like, despite that, he lasted a whole month.
When I was in the Coast Guard, there was an incident when a vessel called in what they thought was another vessel in distress, but couldn't be sure and couldn't raise them on VHF. The watch commander kept refusing to launch the rescue boat until he had more details. Like, dude, this far north the life expectancy of a person in the water without a survival suit is measured in single digits of minutes. We can get more details when the boat is en route. The exact position of a bunch of floating corpses is of limited value. After 3 or 4 minutes I just said, F it, and launched the boat. It turned out the suspected casualties' radio was banjaxed. But they were otherwise fine. Their boat just had a very low freeboard and looked a bit sinky. I fully expected to be poochanned for it. But I was not. The old man had a long conversation with the guy about how nobody will ever find fault with sending an asset to a possible false alarm. But failing to send an asset to a real emergency is, well, it's not good. The dude had previous before I joined for shrugging off a red flare report as a hoax. 2 people died in that one.
I worked in a veterinary hospital for a good number of years. One day, unknown to me, some little girl had found a dead, dying seagull with her family and brought it in to see if we could help it, but it has passed by the time they arrived. Our veterinary technician took said bird for disposal but was too busy to deal with it then, like, put it in the freezer. 1 minute tops with labeling. So instead he just packed a box with the dead bird into our storage area with dozens of similar boxes and just leaves it there. Days go by, while he is still working, I should add, and I come back on shift and something is seriously rank in the office. Customers are complaining. No one knows what would cause it, but I eventually find the box buried beneath other supplies. I walk up to my head receptionist and say, "So, seagull?" and watch the absolute fury grow in her eyes. The tech did not last long after that. TLDR. Vet tech was lazy, put a dead animal into a storage box, then left it to ripen for days while continuing to work there until discovered. One volunteer had no computer experience. We showed her step by step how to do her job. She didn't know what a mouse was, how to click on something, etc. We got her up and running. She was pleased with herself, at having gotten the hang of using a PC. Fast forward 2 hours. Come back to the office and she's in tears. I swear I didn't do anything. There were just fish everywhere all of a sudden. Look at the computer. Aquarium screensaver. After her little breakdown, she had to take the rest of the afternoon off.
I mean, she was telling the truth. She can't have been doing anything for the screensaver to come up. Lol. How long did she last?
She continued afterwards without incident and was good at her job. It was just that one day where it all went wrong.
I worked as a radiation protection tech at a power plant that was refueling. My job was to sit outside of a contaminated area and if anyone wanted to take something out of the area, tools, etc. I had to make sure it didn't have any radioactive particles on it. To do this you wipe the tool with something like a tissue and then hold the tissue up to a machine called a frisker. If the needle on the frisker goes above a threshold then the tool has to be cleaned or left in the area. One day I come back to relieve a guy who had been sitting outside the area for 2 hours. He tells me there's been no issues and everything has cleared. I look at the frisker, lean over and turn the machine on.
So you're telling me Homer having his job in The Simpsons is plausible?
I used to work for a landscaping company and over the course of a summer I witnessed one of my coworkers accidentally set 3 different things on fire: a hedge trimmer, a truck, and himself.
Maybe he was tired of being objectified by his co-workers?
Poured sink cleaning solution into the ice cream machine instead of the cream mixture and I had to stop them. They then said, "I'm sure it'll be fine, it was only a little." No, that would poison people. I had to clean out the whole machine top to bottom and refill it. I ended up throwing away nearly a whole bucket full of contaminated ice cream mixture. I would also like to add that the containers didn't look anything alike. The sink stuff came in big plastic jugs with screw tops and the ice cream comes in cardboard cartons, like orange juice, that you have to cut open. So I don't know how she could have possibly mixed the two up.
Greater than I don't know how she could have possibly mixed the two up. Maybe she didn't.
Took the wrong coffin to a funeral. Someone else had to drive to the cemetery with the correct deceased on board, and thankfully they made it before the viewing.
When my brother died, the hearse took the funeral procession to the wrong cemetery. In their defense, the funeral home had served our family for years, and almost always buried us at Cemetery A. However, my brother was to be buried at another, smaller, nearby Cemetery B, next to his son. As we pulled into Cemetery A, there was an obviously confused groundskeeper staring at us. He knew he hadn't opened any graves that day. I called the funeral home, and they called the hearse, which did a loop around. As we drove back past on the way out, I rolled down my window and shouted to the groundskeeper, "We've changed our minds."
I used to work as a pharmacy tech. Most antibiotics for kids come as powder in a bottle. We add distilled water to make it liquid upon receiving prescriptions, as the solution only remains stable for 10 to 14 days, depending. One day, A father drops an amoxicillin prescription for a child. Usual questions are asked: age, weight, allergies, type of infection, desired flavor. Product is prepared and given to the father. He leaves. 2 hours later he comes back. Says the medication smells funny. I think, duh. Medication often do. But I still waft the scent with my hand to my nose and he's right. Something is off. I give the bottle to the pharmacist. He agrees and makes another bottle right away. The original antibio bottle smelled like straight-up alcohol. In a lab, we keep multiple solvents, for many use. Water, simple syrup, mineral oil, ethanol. One of the techs added ethanol to the antibiotic instead of water. And we were all flabbergasted as how the mistake could have occurred because all the solvents are 1. Of different size, 2. Of different label color and 3. Identified in huge letters. We identified the tech guilty of that mistake and they couldn't even say how that error occurred.
Greater than most antibiotics for kids come as powder in a bottle. We add distilled water to make it liquid upon receiving prescriptions, as the solution only remains stable for 10 to 14 days, depending. Till. I like little behind-the-curtain facts like this. I never would have guessed. I would have guessed that putting alcohol in a kid's medicine is a no-go though.
Was making pizza. Guy broke the pizza board, the thing with the handle you make the pizza on and then slide the pizza into the oven. I found the other one and he lost that. So I told him to make pizzas on one of the plastic cutting boards. He put the pizza into the oven on the board and just left it. The board melted. No more pizza that day.
How do you lose a pizza board? Those things aren't small.
My coworker at the bowling alley had to walk down a lane where a group of very young children, maybe 4 to 8 years old, were bowling to retrieve a ball that had stopped in the gutter about halfway down to the pins. When he had picked up the ball, my other coworker told him to go walk it back down to the children. However, this guy had it in his mind that it would be best to bowl it back down at the group of small children instead. Luckily, one of the adults with the children was a big muscular guy who was able to stop the ball and pick it up without anybody getting hurt. Edit, a typo.
This is the funniest response I've seen. Just bowling at small children.
Annual sales meeting. Brand new guy is seated next to the CEO. He proceeds to put his head down and fall asleep on the table. During the meeting, they woke him up at lunch to fire him.
Putting all the patient's false teeth in a bowl together to soak on a dementia ward. Took us weeks to try and match patient to teeth. No, they weren't marked up with the patient's names. Doubt the right teeth ended up with the right patient. It was guesswork.
I know I'm awful for laughing at this, but it reminds me of that time the Pope ordered all the DKS to be cut off the statues in Rome. Fast forward to a few centuries later and a bunch of art historians were running around Rome with a box of DKS trying to restore them.
I worked for a non-profit that hired a guy in fundraising purely for his Rolodex, and they couldn't care less about any of his job functions as long as he kept bringing more rich people to fundraiser parties. Well, when the pandemic hit and we were forced to go remote, it became clear how incompetent he was with technology, and how he'd been coasting for years in the office by sticking to phone calls instead of email, etc. We had our first major online fundraiser coming up and I warned my boss that this dude had no idea how Zoom worked, never muted himself, camera up the nose, treated it like watching a YouTube video. But again, he was the guy inviting all the rich people to the event, so they didn't want to lecture him about a computer program and hurt his ego. Then in our massive 200-plus person Zoom event, he set his laptop on the bathroom counter and proceeded to take a shirtless, nasty old man dump complete with grunting, splashing, and squelching. It was so loud it drowned out the speaker. They had to end the event early because they had no way to mute him and it kept going for a full 2 minutes with no sign of stopping. I nearly threw my laptop out a window that night.
This was in school, but it's so incompetent I want to put it here. It's a fairly recognizable story from my school. I hope someone finds it. This kid tried to use the teacher's computer to find the answers to our next test. He did it while she was teaching science class, so there was a separate room attached where she stored materials and her laptop. So he's in the room and she's lecturing to the class. Turns out the computer was connected to the projector display. We're all watching on the projector, along with the teacher, what this genius is doing. Man was in her directory folder typing in test.
I knew a dude that printed almost 1,000 pages of counterfeit dollar bills for a joke or prank. The boss walked in immediately after and wound up behind the back area of the business, throwing it all into the burn barrel, getting rid of it. Dude didn't last much longer than that. Working in pharmacy, a pharmacist gave a customer a flu shot and threw the used syringe in the container with the new syringes instead of the container to dispose them. Another pharmacist went to grab a new syringe later on and ended up getting stabbed with the used syringe. Caused a total poo storm.
I replaced a phlebotomist extern who was let go. The wall-mounted sharps in the processing room was full, so he took it down, put his hand over the opening, and shook it up and down to make room. I forget the number of sticks he had, but it was a lot.
I managed a construction security team for a beachfront project which required 24 hours on-site patrol, so I ran the daytime team and my friend ran the graveyard shift. As it was a dredging operation, we had to have 2 guys posted near the shore to make sure civilians weren't running into the area. So think of a square on the beach with a guard on each corner. Well, one night we couldn't find one of our night guards and his phone was sending calls to voicemail. Turns out, he had set up a folding chair in the sand at 2 a.m. and fell asleep at post, only to get wrecked by high tide an hour later. His phone and everything in his pockets were destroyed, and he went home soaking wet without telling anyone. I don't think he was reprimanded, as I'm sure the shame should have been enough punishment. He later got fired for driving a company ATV off a sandbank and getting it stuck.
New temp to hire admin. She was supposed to order lunch for a big meeting. They told her where to order from and how many omnivores, vegetarians, and vegans. She showed me the order she was going to place, and I corrected her, pointing out she didn't have any vegan food or enough vegetarian. She told me I was wrong and ordered anyway, even with me screeching at her not to do it and explaining what was wrong. Omnivores got beef. Vegetarians got chicken. It's not meat. Vegans got salads with egg and cheese. But it has vegetables. She was not hired on full time.
The worst part isn't that she didn't know this, it's that you tried to help her out and she refused.
My wife worked at a gas station and found out her co-worker, who had been there for years, had been refilling the napkin dispenser by cramming them one at a time through the front slot. She walked up and unfastened the back, and apparently his jaw hit the floor. He had never considered that there might be a better way to do this.
Innocent story in a sea of death and destruction.
One of my reports missed a 9 a.m. meeting, and when I asked him why, he said, "You said the meeting was at 12, not 9. Of course I was very confused because the meeting invite said 9 and everyone else on the team knew it was at 9. So he sent me a screenshot of his Outlook calendar, and it turns out he just had all his poo set to the wrong time zone.
Emptying hot fryer oil into a plastic container. Guess how that went? Well, this blew up, and yeah, it melted, went everywhere. What a pain to clean that was. Kid got fired.
Same. 5-gallon bucket. Fortunately I saw it coming and ran out of the kitchen. A few co-workers ended up with second-degree burns on their feet, and the idiot had to have some toes amputated and skin grafts on his ankles. Another guy at the same job forgot to turn the fryers off before cleaning them and nearly set off the dry chem if not for a perfectly thrown sheet tray by the grill X. It wasn't his first rodeo. I have a list a mile long of the poo our completely incompetent project manager did. But the best was insisting that a $3,000 load of fertilizer still absolutely had to be delivered as previously scheduled, despite the company warning against it as we were expecting heavy rains that day. The entire pile was washed away within a couple of hours. Removing the plastic wrapping from a pallet of 5-gallon cans of highly flammable acetone. He didn't have a box cutter, so he proceeded to melt it with a lighter. This was in the middle of a commercial paint warehouse. If it caught fire, you would see it from space.
There was a guy who drove a forklift through a wall in the warehouse. We work in IT. Edit. I didn't expect this comment to get as much attention as it did. It wasn't Michael Scott. Or Dwight. It really happened. It was a guy named Tom who was tasked with going to the storage area in the warehouse to get some laptops. When asked why he used the forklift, which he had never driven before or was even authorized to touch, he said, "I thought it would help." Spoiler, it wouldn't have helped. He was fired immediately.
LMAO, how TF did one of you end up on a forklift?
No idea, really.
A guy was using the overhead crane in a machine shop I worked in. It had 2 hooks on it, one was raised right to the roof, the other was lowered and beside another guy's machine. The guy using the crane was looking at the hook by the roof and mobilized the crane. He was wearing earmuffs and the shop is loud AF, so when he started almost killing everyone in the line of machines with the other hook, he couldn't hear the rest of us screaming. The hook almost threw the first guy into his lathe, hit the next guy's toolboard, flipped over to the side he was on, almost put him into his lathe, rinse and repeat for the next 3 machines. When it bounced over the last one, it grabbed the A-frame that held all the bar stock and started lifting 30 to 40 t of steel off the ground. Someone finally made it to him and slapped the controls out of his hands. That was his last day at that job.
I work maintenance at a grocery store. For context, my boss at the time was very inept when it came to technology. He hated technology with a passion. I understand everyone should know how to use a mop if you are in this line of work, but when you have machines that make it easier, I see no issues in using one. So anyways, my boss couldn't figure out how to use one of our machines, the Tasky, and hated it with a passion even though it's one of the easiest things to use. He couldn't figure out why water wasn't coming out to clean up a sticky floor. All he'd have to do was press the little button that has a water spout on it, which means water will come out if pushed. Instead of asking me or trying to use his brain, he proceeded to kick the poo out of it and destroyed the water tank, and then couldn't understand why water was leaking from it after, and then proceeded to call it a piece of effing poo, and said, "This would have been better if we just used a effing mop." I have so many stories about him, but that's one of my favorites. Dude's effing wild. Edit. The reason it's easier to use the machine is because it not only cleans up the mess but dries the floor too to prevent people from slipping, unlike a mop.
I absolutely hate guys at work that use tools incorrectly or for the wrong job, and then say a tool is a POS or cheap. Like, no poo, that screwdriver will break if you use it as a pry bar, or the machine that goes ping won't work for a job that require a ding. It's not the tool that's worthless in that case, it's you, bud.
Somehow he is the highest paid maintenance guy in the whole company. Managed to figure out loopholes to get paid $32 an hour, yet can't figure out how to use a simple floor cleaner. At least he was entertaining, I guess. LMAO.
PT, with late-stage Alzheimer's, had been progressively getting sicker. Used to be a walker, wanderer, eventually just got a bit sicker each day and bedbound. Everyone kept giving his meds like normal. Ate less, tummy became distended. He was found unresponsive in his bed, apparently vomited, and died. The nurse's aides were in charge of cleaning him up. One went to clean the strange vomit that came out of his nose. She wiped it with her gloved hands. It was poo. He had poo coming out of his nose. He apparently had a bowel obstruction, and it got so bad to the point that everything backed up and he was vomiting up his own undigested food and fecal matter. A simple monitoring of his distended stomach would have revealed that. A simple charting of his last bowel movement would have revealed that. Nobody could find when his last bowel movement was, and the charting that should have been done apparently hadn't been done in months. It could have been caught. He didn't have to die that way. All those little negligent mistakes eventually lead up to one gigantic mistake.
I did landscaping and janitorial work with a 60-year-old toothless Serbian man who hardly knew English and was a refugee from the Civil War. The owners of the company took pity on this guy, since he was a bit of a sad sack and was trying to provide for his family, but he'd constantly do really stupid and odd things. For starters, one of the other groundskeepers put up one of those fake owls on top of one of the buildings. The guy, let's call Bozo, thought it was real for the longest time, and thought it cursed the place. I tried explaining that it wasn't, but he kept wincing about it whenever we saw it. One day, I noticed shards of the owl all over the property, and our boss reprimanding him about bringing a hunting rifle to work. Another situation was when we were using this ride scrubber, like this, link. Well, as you can guess, Bozo was the kind of person to never clean out the scrubber, no matter how long he ran it. While I was lawn mowing, he was doing that, and turned a somewhat dusty floor into a pile of sludge. One of the owners noticed on the security cameras and ran out of their office to him, stomping and yelling at him, stating, "If this isn't cleaned up by tomorrow, don't even think about coming in." Last story. The other owner's wife felt pity on the guy, so she wanted to do something charitable for him. She was cleaning out the owner's closet of clothes, and figured to donate some of his old blazers and suits for Bozo, so he'd look good at church and at events. Bozo instead started wearing the suits and blazers while he was working, remember, as a janitor and landscaper. I walked in one day and noticed Bozo on a riding mower in an old TWD blazer. The owner came up to me and was like, "Tilda, I think that's my old blazer." He still works there, as far as I remember.
Had a temp that was difficult to train. She didn't have a login, so had to use mine, including my email, for comms, which she used to bitch about me to a colleague sitting right next to me, 'cause I had to tell for 100th time how to do something. How did she not realize I would see those emails?
Planted a tree, effing upside down.
What? Why? Edit. 2000 upvotes WTHMIA wordsmith?
I inspect trees on planting blocks and a year 1 seedling was planted upside down. I think they were drunk or high. They did not get paid for their poo work, haha.
A coworker told me she got lost trying to lead someone to the disabled exit. The route to the disabled exit is a straight corridor with no doors on either side. I just don't understand how it was possible for her to get lost. Also, I had to teach her how to make a G and T 9 times. After the 9th time she got it wrong, either by using the wrong ingredients or using the wrong glass. I gave up.
He parked in the CEO's reserved * parking space, a clearly defined area, and was surprised at the end of the workday to see that his car had been towed.
My dad used to do that, when he picked me up from work until I finally got my driver's license. I was 17 years old apprentice at that time, and my dad always parked in the CEO's parking space, right in front of the building, so that the whole company could see me through the windows. I had to beg him to stop doing that, and it still took almost 3 months until he finally stopped. I hated it so much, and I wasn't too much liked at my job after that. Who would have guessed? Edit. Since it lead to a bit of confusion, I'm not from the US, we have to be 18 to get a driver's license here. Sorry, I forgot that it's not the same in other countries.
Had this new delivery kid at a pizza shop. He would take a fair bit longer than normal to deliver, saying it's easy to get to the street road, but difficult to find the exact house. Turns out he had no concept of odd and even house numbers being on opposite sides of the street. Exceptions apply obviously, and was zigzagging across the road. It's one thing to not know that before starting, it's another to do the job for a couple of hours and not immediately recognize it.
My coworker was reasonably competent but needed to write down instructions for everything that they didn't do every single day, but was also terribly unorganized. One time I was called over to help, and so I walked them through the process and they wrote down the directions on a sticky note. When searching for a place to put it, because their walls and monitor bezels were completely covered in notes, they decided that this one spot on the monitor was best. So they took off the sticky note that was already there, and realized it was literally the instructions from the last time I taught them how to do it.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.